Well, it is a pleasure to be with you all again for our last Great Ideas in Teaching seminar. I'm Karen Appleby. I'm a faculty member in the Sports Science and Physical Education Department. And my partner in crime, Cindy Hill, who is director of the Student Success Center and assistant vice president for enrollment management. So this was really Cindy's idea to get these Great Ideas in Teaching seminars going this semester. And so we're so pleased to see the turnout. And today we have a very exciting speaker who I'll introduce in just a moment. But I want to give you just a couple of, see if my clicker's working. Maybe not. Couple of announcements. Catherine, I'll work on this for you. First, this afternoon, like I just said, the hardest part of technology is remembering to turn it on. Yeah, so it is now on. This afternoon, we have a really neat opportunity, and this is being sponsored by the Student Success Center as part of the International Education Week. Bridges is hosting an open house this evening in the Littlewood River Room to talk about their organization and how we can support our refugee population, specifically our students. So if you're interested, that's 4 to 6 p.m. this evening. Another opportunity that we have, a cool opportunity that we have through the Disability Services Center is sponsoring a student who is interested in getting a service dog and does not have the funds to do that. So if you would like to contribute to this effort, they have more information at the Disability Services Center, but I think they're calling it, Tana, what are they calling it? Donate your pennies. So if you have extra pennies, take it over the Disabilities Services Center, which is just right here in Rendezvous, and it will go to support one of our students, which is pretty exciting. And then we also want to present the dates for our next semester Great Ideas in Teaching seminars that we're going to be hosting. On January 18th, we're going to have Barbara Frank present to us. I don't know the topic yet, but Barbara will be down here. She's a faculty member up at our Idaho Falls campus. On February 8th, Mark Macbeth is going to be presenting, and then on March 1st, we'll be hearing from Paul Link. So we'll be marketing the topics and the dates, again, university-wide, but we thought you might just want to get those on your calendar if you're interested in coming to those for next semester. So, and of course, we'll be broadcasting those to all of our distance locations as well. So today, it is my pleasure to introduce Catherine Black, who's going to be talking to us today about measuring student outcomes. So this is our first Great Ideas in Teaching seminar on assessment. Catherine is a senior lecturer in the Department of Biological Sciences. She was recognized as ISU's Distinguished Teacher in 2017 and received ISU Outstanding Master Teacher Award in 2014. She also received the ASISU Idaho Falls Outstanding Faculty Member of the Year Award in 2018. She has enjoyed teaching ever since she started serving as a graduate teaching assistant for the ISU Biological Sciences Department in 1993. She's been involved with undergraduate instruction in Idaho Falls since the construction of the Center for Higher Education building was completed there in 1994, and she became a full-time faculty member in 1998. Catherine teaches classes at the 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and 4,000 level, so a broad range of students that she has. Just a little bit about Catherine personally. She and her husband have 2 children, both of whom graduated with bachelor's degrees in May 2018. Congratulations on that. That's very exciting. A daughter from ISU in health physics and a son from Reed College in math and computer science. She's spent the past 3 summers, this is very cool, walking different routes of the Camino de Santiago in Spain, totaling about 820 miles of hiking. She loves to ride horseback, backpack, hike, and ski in the mountains of Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming with her husband and kids, in addition to gardening and working on her 6-acre ranchette with horses, goats, and other animals. So, Catherine, come on down.
seem to work.
Yes, you do. That's what a good teacher knows how to do. All of her technology.
All right. Well, welcome. I'm excited to be here. I haven't been able to come to any of the other ones because is this microphone still on? Because there's someone in the remote location now. I normally teach a class on Friday mornings. I talked to Dr. Barbara Frank, who will be here next semester, into taking my class to the sewage treatment plant for me this morning. And now I'm not sure, looking at all of you guys, eager faces, whether I'd rather be here or facing sewage. No, this is going to be great. All right. So actually, earlier this week, I asked students in two of my classes, what should I share with the ISU community about great ideas in teaching? What did they experience in their classes they thought were great ideas? You guys have any idea what students would say? What? Less homework? No, actually, they didn't say anything like that. So the number one thing that I heard over and over was be available for students. That they just really appreciate that. And I know that in our work on the Distinguished Teacher Committee, that we see that over and over again when students nominate teachers for Distinguished Teacher, that they just really like being available. And it doesn't have anything to do with my topic, but I thought I'd just pop in on that topic for a second before I go on. So how do you get freshmen to come to office hours, right? So my epiphany on that was, don't call them office hours. Oops, it's not going forward backwards now. All right. I call them study hours, review hours, anything but office hours. And they actually show up. And the other one is don't hold them in your office. I stay after class in the classroom, go down to the lab where they're comfortable, and I don't have to schedule it because I know the lab's open. Go to the student union. We've had a lot of faculty in Idaho Falls that just hang out in the student union and let their students come there. And it just gets students, it makes you seem more approachable. Going to your teacher's office for something called office hours sounds absolutely terrifying. So that said, I still definitely put on the schedule time where students come in and can talk to me privately and not be part of a bigger group. So I still have office hours on there for confidential things and what have you. But for the freshmen, they really seem to like it, and I actually have really good turnout that show up to my study hour after class. All right. I mean, just being, another offer, I'll give you a little preview of, I get a lot of inspiration from other teachers. Barbara Frank holds something called afternoon tea for her office hours, and she actually does serve tea and biscuits and things like that. And so that's super popular, and the students really appreciate having afternoon tea with Dr. Frank in one of the conference rooms. So again, she doesn't do it in her office. And it's really time-consuming to be available for students, but it's so worth it. I mean, I know that one of our goals with the strategic plan here is increasing student retention, and making the students feel welcome and that their teachers care about them just goes a really long way towards student retention. And then you get to regret it when then I can't keep the juniors and seniors out of my office. They think they can just camp out there. But they're much more comfortable coming to my office than the freshmen are. All right, so some of the other ideas that the students had, what I said, what should I share? I'll tell you when I get there. All right. Okay, so one of the things that I tell my students that I take in terms of teaching is that education is like sports or performing arts. And that seems to resonate with them in terms of my role and their role in that. And the teacher is more like a coach or coordinator where you don't have to be, like, you're up there in front demonstrating things for them, but the bulk of becoming an athlete or a musician or a dancer is kind of on those athletes, dancers, and musicians to put in the time. Like, they have to make sure that they practice it. So, the job of the coach is to prepare the students for a game or event, or if you're in the performing arts, for the performance. So there's a lot of things involved where there are exercises that we do in the classroom that aren't really obvious to students. And why do I have to do this? I'll never use this. Have you heard that? And so I point out to them, so from the nursing students, they say, why do I have to learn photosynthesis? I'm a nurse, right? I don't really need to know how plants convert light and whatever. But I said, well, I've never heard a football player say, why do I have to lay on this bench in the weight room and press a bar over my chest? I'll never do that on the football field. But is that still something valuable to do, right? There's strengthening muscles in the weight room that they need on the football field. And so I said it's the same thing, that in learning photosynthesis, you're learning the details of how a cell does a cell function. And you're going to be doing a lot of that. You're going to be moving on to learning how cells in the human body do things. And so it's exercising the part of your brain that helps you understand how cells work. And frankly, if you're going to be a nurse, I'd rather have you practice and fail on photosynthesis than on something more critical. And I also tell them that our job isn't to make college easy, but to show them that they can do hard things. I'm not there to, you wouldn't think that it's a good teacher, a music teacher who's conducting their orchestra to play Mary Had a Little Lamb, right? Or the swim coach that teaches them how to dog paddle, right? We want to teach them how to we want them to be able to play Shostakovich's violin concerto or something quite difficult. That's the goal, right? Is to get them to do something difficult. And you can't make it easy. It's difficult, right? So we have to convince them and encourage them to stretch and be able to do difficult things, not to make it easy for them. Providing encouragement is also a big part of the coach, teacher, music teacher, conductor. I had one semester, first week of class, and I was down in the basement where the labs are, and one of my new students who was sitting there waiting for her lab to start, and she looked up at me, and she's looking around at her fellow students, and she was probably about 33, 35, and she said, I'm really worried about this class. I look around at all these young people, and I'm afraid that my neurons don't fire as quickly as theirs do anymore. And I said, oh, what your neurons lack in speed, they make up for in tenacity, And she just smiled, and she ended up being the top student in the class. And it's just like little things like that can really make a difference in encouraging students. All right, then from the student's perspective, right, they have to practice. That's their job. They have to, you can't just, so sports and music and dancing take daily practice, and education should be no different. And when I explained it to them that way, they actually all they get it then. That you can't, I was like, you can't just go show and watch what the coach does at practice, and then go home immediately, and then show up maybe throw from free throws the night before the game and think you're going to perform well in the game tomorrow. Or you can't, listen to what your conductor says about the music and never practice it, and practice a couple hours the night before the concert and be able to play, right? Those things take daily practice, and education is no different. And that seems to resonate with them. So in that sense, I see exams or papers or portfolios or whatever it is that we're using to assess students as the game for sports or the event or performance. That's their day to perform. And it should be exciting, not dreaded. Right? So that's why athletes practice, because they're excited about being able to play a game or show how fast they can swim or how fast they can run. And musicians are practicing because they're excited about, being able to perform music or a dance. So why should education be any different? Why shouldn't they be excited to be able to show off what they've been working so hard on exam day? And I think that we, K through 12, K through 17, whatever, that we make these exams seem as these dreaded things instead of these exciting days to perform. And sure, when you're up there performing your violin concerto, you're a little nervous, right? That's normal, but you shouldn't be like, I hate this and I don't want to be here. It should be an exciting day to show off what you've learned. So I think that if you just kind of tell them that with that attitude, and I think if we as teachers work harder to make exams and evaluation things, assessment tools, seem as something exciting, then that can really improve student attitudes. All right, so mostly what I'm going to talk about today is testing, because that is a lot of what I do, and I teach big classes where testing is important. So in terms of measuring student outcomes, I'm mostly going to talk about how I go about doing testing and what are some testing strategies and how to prepare students for testing. And so it's mostly going to be about testing, but I think a lot of this could apply to other forms of assessment, certainly, and I'll try to bring those in when I can. I'm probably a little bit OCD about data, so I probably think a lot more about testing than the average person. And so, I mean, feel free to this isn't one way to do it. I'm just going to throw a lot of ideas at you, and, feel free to pick up what you can. I tend to collect a lot of data and obsess over data and things like that, and organization. I'm also really organized. I know that doesn't always fit everyone's style, which was actually another point that my students brought up, was that they were pretty happy with a wide range of teaching styles. Like, they didn't say, oh, I like this person's teaching style. Their thing was mostly just about passion and being available, and that's what they saw as great ideas in teaching. And having teachers teach to their own style and feel comfortable with the way they're teaching instead of trying to copy somebody else's style. All right, so what do you guys think it means to teach to the test? What does that mean? What did you say?
Your focus is just for their success in that I'm showing and work with the line exactly what you're doing.
Okay, so she said focusing on the test and aligning what you do in the classroom to the test, because there is someone in the remote location. So I'm going to repeat what you guys say so they can hear it. Anything else? In terms of, so is that good or bad, teaching to the test?
I don't think it is. I think it has a negative.
I agree. I think it has an extremely negative connotation. Oh, yeah. It depends on the test. Is that what you said? Yes, I would agree with that as well. It absolutely depends on the test and what the questions look like. Anybody else? No. So one of the things that irritates me, I feel like I do teach to the test, but not in the way that most of you are thinking, in the negative connotation. Because one of the most irritating questions, and I tell the students, there's no stupid questions except this one: will it be on the test? That is the only question that I get irritated on. Or variations of that. Do we have to know this? Or, I'm going to be on vacation the first week of the semester. Am I going to miss anything important? Have you all heard those? Yes. So no, yes, I teach to the test. No, I'm not going to tell you what's on the test. I mean, everything's important. It's impossible to teach to the test, right? I don't know how your classes are. I give an exam about every 4 weeks. So there's about 10 and a half hours of teaching and then a 1-hour test. So I'm not just going to teach 1 hour of material and then repeat it 9 more times and then test on it, right? So that's not what college is. I tell my students that my tests are a weighted random sample. See, that's the data geek in me, of what I cover. If I spend a lot more time on it, you're probably a lot more likely to see it on the test. But anything I talk about is fair game. If it's not important, I'm not going to talk about it. So, and especially if I stop doing my PowerPoint and start writing things on the board, I'm like, you should probably pay attention to that. And I tell them that employers want critical thinkers who can figure things out that we don't teach them. That's our goal in teaching, is to get students to figure things out for themselves that they haven't been taught. And I said that's why bachelor's degrees are higher, get so much more pay, because it's not job training. It's not where we train you to do this and then you do it. Employers want people with bachelor's degrees because they can learn, they can figure things out that they've never been taught because of those critical thinking skills. We know that they're going to forget everything they memorized. And that if it's just a fact that you can Google, that anybody can do that. And you don't need a bachelor's degree to be able to use Google to look up facts. Right, and then one of the other great ideas that my students pointed out when I asked them what should I tell people, and they said, don't helicopter teach. Actually, I thought that was really cool that they came up with that. They said, don't helicopter teach. Trust us and let us figure things out for ourselves. What about other testing methods? Can you teach to the test for other forms of assessment besides tests? So I would imagine in a literature class, if you read a book and then you analyze it in class and then ask them to write a paper analyzing the same things that you discussed in class, then you just taught to the test, right? So I think you could certainly teach to the test on other forms of assessment as well. All right, so I'm going to try to talk about teaching to the test the right way. So if you think about it, right, we have course objectives, we have objectives from the general education program, and we have things that we want our students to learn in these classes, and we use tests and other assessment methods like papers and portfolios and things like that as a means to assess what students have learned. And so yes, in that sense, right, since we're using assessment as a way to figure out what students learn, then we should be teaching students what we expect them to learn, right? So in that sense. So I always start with my course objectives for my Bio 1101 course. These are the objectives. And today I'm mostly going to focus on my photosynthesis unit. So when I'm teaching photosynthesis, I look at what in my overall course objectives that the department has put on the COSI website, what am I teaching in this unit on photosynthesis that I need to make sure I cover because it's expected of a Bio 101 course by the overall course objectives that the department posts. So I kind of underline those things. And as I'm teaching, I make sure I'm teaching those things. And then when I get to the test, I make sure that I'm writing effective assessment of whether my students learn those things. So I kind of underline the things that I thought were important in terms of photosynthesis so that when I'm teaching them, I have that in mind as I'm going. And then it's also a general education course, so I always look at the general education objectives as well and make sure before I even start teaching, how can I make sure, and I try to do it in every single unit. I try to look at the gen ed objectives and for every single unit that I teach. So when I'm teaching osmosis and cell membranes, how can I make sure the students can apply foundational knowledges in this topic, critically evaluate arguments, interpret and communicate, and explain the relevance. And then I do it again for photosynthesis and everything. So I'm always keeping that in mind as I go. And then finally, I imagine you've all heard of or seen the Bloom's taxonomy. So I use that more. So for the gen eds, actually, I think they cover Bloom's really well. There's a lot of applying and analyzing and evaluating in the gen ed requirements. So I tend to focus more on that because I think they're kind of already covering Bloom's. And then for my other courses, I look more at the Bloom's and see that I'm teaching all the levels. Now, ISU is tough. It's an open enrollment school and has a lot of non-traditional students who've been out of school for a long time. So even the lowest levels of Bloom's can be challenging for a lot of students, and you can't do the higher levels till you know the lower levels. How can you apply the knowledge if you're struggling even to get the basics? How can you take that and apply it? So it is difficult. And if you overwhelm them with application, then they can't even see the understanding below it. So you do have to be, there's a reason that it's shown with the base, much bigger. But we try to, introduce it and then build on it. So as you go through higher classes, you do more and more and more. But it does bother me when students say, oh, there's so much information in this class. There's so much memorization. And I point out to them, if you focus on the concepts and you understand the concepts, then you don't have to memorize as much. Right? And it's not just if you think about that. I point that out to my students. I said, you guys know what gravity is, right? Does gravity affect this piece of paper? And they say, yes. Does it affect this pencil? Yes. Does it affect these glasses? Do I have to memorize that gravity affects all three objects? No, I just had to understand the concept and be able to figure out. And then I said, now make it harder. Does it apply to liquids? Does it apply to gases? Does it apply to planets? And so, so you have to think a little harder to apply it to more difficult concepts, but you don't have to memorize it all. One of my favorite, one semester in ecology at the end, I had an open office hours for studying for the final exam, and about 3 students, because it was a small class, came in, and there was only 1 woman in the class that semester, and like 9 men, actually, and which is totally flopped now. In last summer, before the semester started, there was 1 man and 9 women registered, and then 3 more men registered. So it's not quite so lopsided now, but still so. So anyway, the woman was really, really gifted, really bright, but she'd never been like the top student in the class. And so they were sitting there asking all these questions, and she had there's so much information. And one of the other students in the class actually turned to her and said, there's really not. Everything in ecology is about how does natural selection favor the most efficient use of energy? And if you always think about that, then you can figure everything else out. And she's like, wow, I never thought. It was just like an eye-opening moment for her. I feel really bad that it didn't happen until right before the final. But she went on and just aced the final. It was just blew it out of the water and did so much better than everybody else in the class. Once she had that moment that all she had to do was think about this core principle, and she could figure everything else out without memorizing it. So I think you can apply these things to other assessment methods besides tests. And how are you assessing like basic foundational knowledge? How are you assessing whether students can apply and things like that? So I start out the semester making a game plan. For each topic, what should my students already know from learning that took place before this class? And because it's in an open enrollment school with non-traditional students, I have pretty low expectations for that. So I'm hoping that they know that photosynthesis has something to do with light, and that plants are the things that do it. That light is a form of energy, and they're trying to capture that energy. But I actually make a list of questions, and then I also once I get past the first 4 chapters, what do they need to know from earlier in the semester? And I write all these things down, and actually write them as questions. So they need to understand electrons. Electrons are really involved in photosynthesis. Do they remember electrons? Do they remember oxidation and reduction that we did in earlier chapters? And then I put a pre-quiz on Moodle for them to take, and if they do poorly on that pre-quiz, then I suggest that this topic's one they're probably going to have to put more time into, go look at some Khan Academy videos, or I provide them resources that if you're struggling with this stuff that I'm going to assume that you already know, then you probably need to go, put some extra time into this. And then I move on to my list with what are the essential things that I need my students to know about photosynthesis? And the way that really helps me with that is, what am I going to be embarrassed about when my students get to the next class and they don't know, and their teacher's like, you don't know this? And so what would I be embarrassed to find out that my students move on to the next level, whether it be the next level class or graduate school or a job, and not know? So those are my essential topics that I think even students who are getting C's in this class should be able to know this. And I write them as questions. And then I have what would I really like them to know on top of that? And I'm hoping that most of the students will get out of that. And then what are some advanced topics that I know not everybody's going to get, but I think are important to introduce here so they've at least heard of it, and that the more advanced students can start learning on. So I have this whole list of questions that are kind of categorized, and and that's kind of where I'm shooting for. And then once I've made those questions, then I develop my course materials. My PowerPoints, my class activities, homework, and things like that are based around those things. And if I find, so then I go back and forth. If I'm developing my course materials and I come up with something that's not a question about, I have to think, do I need to add this to my questions? Or if I have a question on my thing, but I'm having difficulty coming up with how am I going to present this in this course, then I really question myself about whether, is this necessary, or how, I go back and forth between the questions helping me develop the course, and the course helping me develop the questions, so that they mesh and they go together and they make sense with each other. All right, so I have all that on here. What should my students know? I keep forgetting to advance my slides. Oops. So one of the other things that my students said was, make us apply our knowledge, but give us some practice at doing it. So they're really excited about doing those higher level things in balloons. They actually are very excited about doing hard things, if you make it sound exciting. But they want some practice at it. They don't want you to just give them those understand and remember things and then throw the applying at them on the exam. And the other thing that I was surprised at, because I get a lot of complaints about it in my freshman class, is optional homework. All my homework is optional. And I think, and I have them, and not because I'm too lazy to grade it, although I do have a lot of students, not as many as some of you. I know the bio class here in Pocatello has over 200 students in each section, and mine only has like 76, so I can't complain too much. But I find that when I require homework, students are more obsessed. It becomes more about what they write down on the paper than what's in their head. That they're doing it to get points for it. They're doing it to get work done. And they don't do it, they don't have to think about, once it's on the paper, it's done. It doesn't have to be in their heads. It only has to be on the paper or whatever electronic medium that they're filling it out in. But it becomes more about what's on the paper than what's in their head. And they don't worry. They'll work with their friends, which is great. We like collaboration and working together as long as both people involved are learning it and they're not just, what did you put on this so I can write it down, right? Or I looked something up, wrote it down, and promptly forgot it. And when I make the homework, I don't actually tell them it's optional. I just say I don't grade it. I said it's not optional, but I'm not going to collect it or grade it because it's for you. It's for you to do. And when they have to do it for themselves, then they're not going to do it if they're not just going to write down stuff, right? If they're doing it for themselves, they're doing it to learn it. And if they have to get points for it, they do it to get the points instead of to learn it. So I thought it was interesting that it was my senior students who said that they found that super valuable. The seniors all said they really liked the ungraded homework, to doing it for themselves instead of doing it to get it done. And then it's like the freshmen all think when they're doing homework, they think it's because we want 76 drawings of mitosis to put a display on our fridge or something. I don't know. Because they get turned. I hope you can understand what I've written. I hope you can. I have really bad art, so I hope you can tell what I've drawn. And I'm like, but it's not for me. They think they're doing it for me when they get points for it instead of doing it for themselves. And the other thing I tell them as freshmen, and it resonates, and like I said, the seniors really seem to get it. If you can't make yourself do homework for the sake of learning without getting points for it, how bad do you want to be a doctor or a nurse or a fisheries biologist? Like, if you're not interested in this subject enough to want to learn about it on your own, then do you really want to be that topic? And so that's one of my irritations, I think, a little bit with, I think there's a lot of emphasis in K through 12 on getting your work done. That's what they always ask kids. Did you get your work done? And it's never, did you learn anything? It's, did you get the work done? And when they miss school, they just have to make up the work. And so it's always about turning in pieces of paper with scribbles on it and never about, did you learn anything? And, I think, with Power School, you check Power School and make sure do they have Power School here in Pocatello? It's, yeah. So you check and make sure your kids have a score for every single thing, which is great, but then it becomes about getting it all done instead of about learning. So we need to change the focus to doing work to learn and not doing work for the sake of the work. All right, so now, yeah. So now when we get to the exam, what kind of exam should I use? So we've got multiple choice, true, false, fill in the blank, matching, short answer, which could be math problems, drawings, diagrams, a few sentences, or longer essay questions. So what are your thoughts on the value or your thoughts on those different means of exam questions? She said it depends on your objective. Like, give me an example.
Well, if you're just wanting to knowledge, then I would do multiple choice. If I'm wanting to test. So I'm in nursing. So if I'm testing their knowledge, I'll do a multiple choice. But if I want to test their application, then I'm going to do an essay, or I'm going to say, demonstrate how you would take care of this patient.
Okay, so kind of back to the Blooms. The lower on the Blooms, more multiple choice. Higher on the Blooms, more essay.
I think should be consistent with what kind of problem you're giving class, the homework. So you cannot just present one kind in class and ask them something different and then the exam.
In terms of the type of
Yeah,
question?
the type of question, yes. That's what you're asking, right?
Yeah, yes. Okay, good. Anybody else?
So I used to use a diverse set of testing methods or assignments to achieve an outcome, but the reality, I'm a physical therapist, is all of my graduates have to pass a 5-hour multiple choice exam on content on a computer. So I have now revised most of mine to model. I've been on the testing committee, so I try to model the types of questions that are there. And often the way they're written, the ideal knee-jerk response is not present, and they have to discern between the next best possible response. So I try to model that. It's not that I've eliminated other things, but now that modeling becomes the main thing I use, because that's how they'll be tested in the future.
Anybody else? So what are some advantages and disadvantages of multiple choice? Easy to grade. That's definitely the biggest advantage.
Yeah. Some of the students that are so smart, they can just get it right without even knowing anything.
Yeah, for some students, you're testing their testing ability, and they're figuring out more than their knowledge. So that's a disadvantage. Anything else? I would say another disadvantage is that we, the teacher, came up with all the wrong answers. What about true, false? Good or bad, advantages, disadvantages? I feel like a lot of teachers feel some pressures from somewhere, I'm not sure where, to have a mix, that they've got they got some true, false, they got some fill in the blank, they got some multiple choice. Do you think it's important to have a mix of types of questions?
I think it's important to have a mix of types of questions. And with true and false, at least you know if 50-50, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. You know, there are methods to.
But that means that when we as teachers grade it, we don't know if they were a lucky guesser or
Right, that's the
so.
con.
So I would say that doesn't really give us as teachers much feedback on how well they know it, because 50% of the students are going to get it just from guessing. And so if 60% of your students get it, does that mean really only 10% of them got it and the rest of them guessed? And then a lot of people will modify those by making, if it's wrong, you have to write a justification why, but then that makes it not so easy to grade anymore. Go ahead.
Yeah, according to statistics, that the expected gain is 0 for multiple choice, so they can guess and it'll be fine. So,
Right, so if you have 5 choices, random chance says that 20% guessing, right? And true, false, you're going to get 50%, right? And fill in the blank, you just still get just one word. A lot of times that's just testing definitions. I tell my students I will never test a definition. I mean, what good does it do for them to know the definition of photosynthesis or even of an autotroph? If I just ask them, give me an example of an autotroph, if they don't know what one is, they can't give me an example, right? So they have to know the definitions to answer the questions. And then with fill in the blank, then you have to judge their spelling and is it close enoughly spelled? And so it adds grading time, I think, without actually adding much value in terms of evaluating. So in my opinion, and you're welcome to do whatever, but in my opinion, true, false, fill in the blank are they add extra grading time above multiple choice without a lot of value. If you have time to grade things like that, or if you just do straight true false, you're not getting much information about what your students really know if you don't ask them to say why it's wrong. But if you do ask them to say why it's wrong, it's extra grading without a lot of extra information. Fill in the blank, same thing, extra grading, matching, same thing. That if you don't have a lot of time, multiple choice, that's either A, B, C, or D, and you're done, and it's quick. And if you have limited time in the week as a teacher, right? Everybody does. Then it's better to just get that multiple choice done, and then that extra time you have for grading, spend on a short answer and longer essay questions, and not throw in a big mix. Because what's great about short answer is that now the students are choosing the wrong answer. And that's so eye-opening for me as a teacher to see, because when they came up with things that would never in a million years have thought of putting as a wrong answer on a multiple choice question. And then when you see that same wrong answer over and over again, it really makes you think, what did I do something in the classroom? Where are they getting this idea? And how can I teach this better next time to avoid this common misconception? Whereas with a multiple choice, you're just getting, they didn't know that, and they chose this wrong answer that I came up with, but you don't know why they chose that wrong answer. Is there a question back there?
So I understand that from a assessment point of view, when you're trying to figure out exactly what the students know, you don't want any guesses. But you also have, on the other hand, the point of view of a fairness to the students, because every student has a different learning style, and if you only use one style of learning, then you are privileging those students whose learning style matches up with that, and you are not privileging those who do not. So if you insert a random assortment of testing styles, you are allowing each student to change and learn other testing styles, but also equally privileging all students.
Perhaps. I'm just not seeing that the students who do poorly on multiple choice tend to do poorly on true, false, and fill in the blank. And it's a bigger difference between those quick, short things. You're right. Some do better on those quick, short things, and then others do better on the short answer, where they actually have to write complete sentences, usually. I expect that. Or short essays. And so I think if you mix that, you achieve those objectives without having to throw in different styles of the quick, short thing. But I would agree with the person over here who said that it's much quicker. You can test a lot of content, especially at Bloom's 1 and 2 with multiple choice really quickly, and then just pick a few things to test at those higher Blooms with your short answers. So you're also wasting your time on just regurgitation in a short answer. Right, that you can, in my opinion, that I tend to use the precious time that I have to grade to see if they can apply and evaluate and things like that. All right, what else have I got here? What proportion of each type of question should I have? It depends on what you're trying to achieve, right? But I do, as I move up from my 1,000 to 2,000 to 3,000 to 4,000, they get less. I mean, mostly because I have way fewer students, that I don't need to use multiple choice to save grading time, because I only have 9 students in my 400 level class. So what factors should determine that? Size of the class and the level combined. I also want my seniors to be able to express themselves in writing a lot better. So here's another one. What should the first question be on the exam? Anyone have an opinion? Does it matter? Do you just randomize all your questions?
Well, sometimes you have to mix, shuffle all your answers to prevent
cheating.
But if I didn't have to worry about that, I like to start with easy, like true, false. So then, I can do that. Then I can do that.
Exactly. I agree. I think that even when you're trying to write a really tough exam, it gives students confidence when they know the first question. It can really blow. If they don't know even the first question, it's a confidence killer. And all of a sudden, all those students who do struggle with whatever exam types have lost their confidence. And so I do 2 versions only of the exam, and then they're every other chair. And but I write my exam, and then I cut and paste at the top, and they don't know where the cut is. And so I think it's pretty, if they were looking closely at their neighbor's exam to figure out that their number 23 is that person's number 47, and then it goes from there, then I think I would notice that as I'm proctoring. But I do make sure I cut at the beginning of a topic, so all mine are, my exam has membrane transport, enzymes, photosynthesis, respiration. And they're grouped by topic because I think that's fair to have them be able to think about a topic. So then I pick and just move one of the other topics to the top and make sure that it's easy to give them confidence. Once in a while, I really fail at what I think is easy is not actually easy. And I expect everyone to get this, and they don't. And it's astonishing to me. And so when they turn them in, I put them in piles. If they got this exam, it goes in this pile, and this exam, it goes in this pile. And it's all, every once in a while, I get the first 12 people who turned in the exam are all version A, and I haven't got a single one in version B, even though overall for the exam, they all have the same questions, just in a different order. And a lot of times I find that one that they get turned in late is one where the first question was harder than I anticipated for them. And then occasionally I even see that in the averages where same exact questions, just a different order, and I get different averages if I underestimated the difficulty of the first couple questions. They've lost their confidence, now they're taking extra time, and so I think it's a way to build confidence. All right. So like I said, I like to do the weighted random sample, and I make sure that I'm covering the course objectives, the gen ed objectives, and multiple levels of Bloom's.
I assume I could do that with this.
And so also I think about how many should be hard, easy, and medium. Not all the questions should be the same difficulty, right? So it should be a mix. If they're all the same difficulty, then I'm not challenging different students at different levels. It is important that you use different examples and problems than you did in the homework. Otherwise, you did teach to the test, right? So if I've covered an example and on the test I say give an example of an autotroph, and I gave them the example in class, then obviously I'm not testing whether they understand what an autotroph is. I'm just testing if they memorize the example that I gave them. So I try to, this is kind of a mix that I tend to do, but you'll find the right mix for yourself. In terms of wrong answers, nonsense and silly stuff isn't really helpful, with rare exceptions. I usually throw one silly one in on the final. Don't overuse all of the above, none of the above. And if you do use those a lot, make sure that you're weighting them. So if you use all of the above as one of 5 choices, make sure that it's no more than 20% of the right answers. Because the students they love all of the above. And so if every time you use all of the above, it's the right answer, then that becomes a problem. You're not really testing that. So if you're going to use all the above, make sure that you're averaging all of the above about the same percent that it appears. And I like to use wrong answers to make it easy to create different versions of the same exam. So I say, so when I did an exam recently on DNA replication, and I said, what is the function of the enzyme ligase in replication? And then my answers were the function of ligase, the function of primase, the function of other enzymes. So next time I write the test, all I have to do to make a different version is to change. It makes it really easy for me to have a test bank when I write my question, so that all I have to do is change one thing and it's a different question. I think I'm going to skip other types because I think it kind of much applies here. The one thing about test banks you have to be careful with is they often overestimate their Bloom's level. So this one, they're saying is an apply, a Bloom's level 3 apply, and I'm seeing that as a memorize. My students in Bio 101, they don't know enough about chemistry to know the properties of carbon dioxide and be able to figure that out. I've already told them that, and I would be hard-pressed to see that you're going to teach Bio 101 in a way that they know enough about the properties of the chemicals for you to throw a chemical at them they haven't seen and be able to tell that if it crosses the membrane or not. So I think they overestimate. And then this one really bugs me. This is from my ecology textbook. And they say this is Bloom's level 5, evaluate, and it's just an example. So you do have to, it's nice that they're now doing that and trying to classify, but you need to use your own brain about what's actually what level it is. All right. So which level of Bloom something is does depend on how you teach it in the classroom. That's where teaching in the test comes in. So here's an example of me talking about enzymes in class. So in class, I give them these graphs, and I ask them, why do the enzymes have curves in different places? So we're actually, in class, but with a lot of help from me, kind of doing some analysis level of Bloom's, but they get a lot of help with it there in class. So this is, what I go over in class. And then on a homework, remember this is ungraded though, that I ask them, and we haven't talked about this in class on the homework, to explain why having a fever during an illness can be dangerous. So that's an apply question. I haven't talked about it, but we've talked about enzymes and can they apply it. So I give them some practice, but if I give this same question on the exam, it goes back to a regurgitation question. So this last exam